Eric, thank you so much for joining us today in this Antisyphon Anti-Cast. You're going to be talking about Active Directory hacking, 3 new techniques. Eric, take it away.
Thank you very much, Deb. Thank you for having me here. Yes, so as mentioned, Active Directory hacking, 3 new techniques, and the new is in quotes for a very important reason. These aren't necessarily new techniques. Having seen a lot of what's going out there with pen testing and what people are doing, there's a lot of reliance on a whole bunch of automated tools, things like Bloodhound, which are great. And all of these tools are very, very good. But they often will be picked up by different utilities that might be out there. So what I wanted to do is cover some other ways that we as pen testers or we as defenders or whatever we might be could start seeing information and then modifying information in AD without relying on a shell or relying on any of these tools. Before I start, I noticed that it's the 31st. I put that date in there, and I can't believe that we're almost done with the first month of the year. It is just flying by. Before I start, as mentioned, my name is Eric Kuehn. I'm a principal security consultant with Secure Ideas, actively working with Antisyphon for our training and getting our information out there. I'm in the Charlotte area, which is really, I'm south of the border in South Carolina, but just outside of Charlotte. Been doing security consulting for 7 years. Before that, my experience was really around Windows engineering, with Windows systems architecture applications, Active Directory. I've been dealing with Active Directory since before it was officially released. So way too much of my time. Beyond that, now I do penetration testing, security consulting, and training like this. I really, really enjoyed the training. The whole goal here really, for me and my companions are, we want the world to be a better place. If I could get everybody to have their environments be secure because they know what it takes or what we're doing as attackers and pen testers, and they can prevent it, that would be better than me continuing to do what I'm doing. I could find something else. I like getting paid. I like what I do, but I could find something else, and I'd much rather have the world be a safe and secure place than knowing that my 4 kids, all of their medical information has already been leaked out on the web, at least 6 times. And my youngest is only 16. So all sorts of problems. Other things when I'm not teaching, training, etc. I'm a huge movie enthusiast. So I really like the idea of talking about Star Wars and other movies. My major actually was film and audio. I moved into computers because at the time when I was in college, the whole idea of having to move to New York or LA and be a starving artist didn't really mesh with the woman that I loved and married and having a family. Beyond that, I love playing games, role-playing games, online games, board games, etc. And as I mentioned before, father of 4. So that's me in a nutshell. We're here to talk about Active Directory, though. So if you're not familiar with it, why should we care? If you're a pen tester or you are a defender, you are probably already aware, but Active Directory is everywhere. Right? If there is an environment out there that has more than 3 Windows systems in it, it's probably using Active Directory. It is the legacy system that provides your centralized identities, authentication, and kind of authorization in Windows networks. Microsoft is definitely urging people to move to Azure and Entra, but until every app that is on-prem has been migrated and can start using OAuth or SAML, etc., AD is going to be around for a while. Beyond it doing its general background stuff, it also holds a significant amount of information. When I say significant, I'm not just talking about group names or user IDs. I mean that you can find an incredible amount of information in there. Just a couple of months ago, I was doing a pen test and I was looking at different IDs and different things out there, and I found passwords in clear text. I also found that there was a very old application that someone had written that was putting things like financial account information and other things like that into a different directory, a different domain in the forest. It is amazing what you can find if you're just willing to start looking at AD and seeing what's there. So it's amazing what you can find. Beyond that, because it is the centralized authentication and authorization area for Windows, it means if you can compromise it, you have full control over the network. You are able to get everywhere. You may need to do some extra steps, add yourselves into groups, etc., but really you own the entire environment. So as pen testers, we are always trying to get domain admin or privileged access into AD so that we can find a way of giving ourselves access to what the client really cares about. You know, the client says, I need you to gain access to that SQL server, pull out information from that database. Okay, we can go through different methods, find a way to get the somebody's specific account, or if we can gain access to AD and just say, you know what, my account is now a database administrator, now I have access. Different ways of getting to the same place. So Active Directory, there's two parts to it. Number one, we want to read information out of AD so we can plan our attacks, see where we need to go, who we want to become, what groups we need to get to. But then also we need to be able to modify it. Reading information out of AD just requires a set of credentials. Those credentials could be a normal user account that the client gives you when you're doing a test. It could be a computer account. Perhaps you got a web shell or some other method of gaining shell access to a server. You can use that server itself to be able to read information out of AD. It does not require anything except having a valid account in the environment. Now, modifying information, that's another step. It does require that you have permissions. So you need to find that ID that you're trying to get to. You may not need to get the incredibly privileged or administrative access to do it. You might be able to do it with some other set of credentials because they said these people are able to modify groups in the environment. Any number of things. So reading, all you need are a set of credentials. Normal user, doesn't need to be a member of any groups. It's just a set of credentials. Modifying requires special permissions. So what are some of these tools we can use to get this information? Once again, I mentioned Bloodhound. Absolutely. Bloodhound, not in my list here today. That could be a separate class on its own. Very common tool used by pen testers. It goes out and it will query a huge amount of information out of AD. It will then start looking at different devices on the network, and it gives you this beautiful map of, hey, what you need to do is find a way to become an admin on this box. Now go here, then do this. Gives you a path from A to Z. Very easy. Once again, though, Bloodhound and most of the utilities like it at this point are going to be caught by every endpoint protection known to man. If anybody has something in the back end doing behavioral analysis, it will absolutely catch you. If you're using a Defender for identity or other tools like that, it will catch you very quickly and say something strange is going on here. So maybe we want to use some other tools to get the same information a little bit slower, but still get to the same end goal. So first up on my list, and probably my least favorite, are the Netexe tools out there. These are really old. They're holdover from Windows NT. They've kind of progressed. These are old command line utilities. Things like net accounts, net group, net local group, net user. All of these are built into every version of Windows. They're right there, always easy to use. It's very easy to use them to make changes because they can accept very specific commands. It doesn't require any special knowledge about the environment. It's very consistent because they've been held over for a very long time. Some downsides, though. Number one, the device that you're going to run these commands from need to be part of the domain that you're trying to make the changes to or read information out of. You can't have your own attack host sitting out there that you haven't joined to the domain. It's just a Windows box, or Windows box in this case, sitting on the network that you control, but it's not actually in the domain. It's its own independent thing. It's in a work group. You cannot use these commands at all on them. It's also not the best for getting information. It can absolutely give you a very good amount of information, but it's very limited because they are compiled executables that can only return exactly what they've been told to get. So really your searching is very limited, but it's still there. In addition, similar to Bloodhound, this is probably going to get you flagged as suspect by any EDR, especially if you use the group's local group or user information. Let me see. So any significant caveats to use pass the hash net on Linux from a non-domain joined computer instead of the Windows. So I have not tried to do that before. I could definitely see and see what happens. I haven't done it. I do know that really a lot of times when you're using the net commands from Linux and a whole bunch of tools that exist out there, quite often what you're doing is, yeah, you said it, you're passing the hash, or you're saying, I'm doing some sort of SMB exec or other method of having that device run this command for me. So it will work, but once again, it will probably still get caught. Depending on how you're trying to pass it, though, it might be caught in a variety of different ways. The SMB exec could be caught as a new service has been created and we removed it, any number of ways. So it can work, right? But typically, as I said, in that case, you're actually asking the device to run it. You're not running it from the Linux box itself, unless I misunderstood the question. So when we look at this, I have 4 up there because there's actually, I want to say there's 12 to 15 different net commands these days now. Net accounts is the first one that's practically out there. Very easy way to figure out what the password policy is for the domain. That's about it, all you're going to get out of that. Net group and local group do the exact same thing. They are going to give you information about all the groups or a specific group if you ask it. Local group is listed as supposedly only the groups on your box, but really that is for a specific type of group in AD as well. User will give you information about a specific user that you query in there. So when we look at some examples here, if we wanted to get all the members of the domain admins group, it's very simple, net group, domain admins. The /domain is very important for a lot of these commands because that says actually query the domain, not the local box I'm on. Adding a member, this is probably one of the oldest commands and every pen tester will let you know. Net group domain admins, user1 /domain/add will add the user into that group. One of the oldest known ways of doing this over and over again. And once again, is probably going to get you flagged. It's very important that you remember to put that user1 in there, though. If you just say net group domain admins /domain/add, you're going to try and create a new group called domain admins, which will not work. You can remove people as well by running the /delete. As I said, you can create a new group. You can do other things like get the membership of domain local groups, which is a separate type of group. There's global, domain local. They're used differently in AD. Overall, if you know a group exists out there and you do net group and it doesn't give you the information, try net local group. I bring up administrators as a very important one here. Many pen testers are always going for domain admins. That's what we want to get. Administrators is a group that exists in the domain, just like it does on every Windows server or Windows device. And it gives you full administrative control over domain controllers and Active Directory. It doesn't have some other benefits that domain admins has, but if you can get the ability to be a member of administrators, you can add yourself to domain admins and you're set. Someone did mention that the net group or any of the net commands will not give you nested group information. That is absolutely correct. I would cover that in a minute, but to go through it now, with an Active Directory, when you are a member of a group, you could put an individual user in there, or you could put a group in there and then have members of the group that's a member of the group you actually care about. These commands are just going to give you the direct membership. If you are in a nested group, whether that is 1 level below or 30, it doesn't make a difference. This will not show it. It will just show the direct membership. So speaking of avoiding getting caught, any thoughts of avoiding detection with the net1 exe as a workable substitute? That is absolutely, yet again, another way that you can try and avoid detection. It depends on your client and what they are using and how they have tuned things. It is really all the time, right? Between pen testing and defenders, we have this ongoing battle forever of, hey, our detection tools are getting really, really strong. And then suddenly the pen testers and attackers are finding better ways of getting through, etc. So it depends on your client. I have some clients that their blue teams, their purple teams are incredible. I try and do something once and it will never work again. And it's not because I did the simple, let me rename something. They start looking at the behaviors and what is actually being called and start picking up on that. Those clients, things like renaming an executable from one to another is not going to work. If you are dealing with clients that have default out-of-the-box systems, it very well could, but it depends on what you see and who you're dealing with. If you're doing a pen test versus a red team engagement, and this might be my own method of thinking about this, and other people might be different. A pen test engagement is I'm trying to find as many methods to get to the end goal as I can in a short period of time. I'm loud, I'm noisy. I don't care if you catch me or not. Actually, I would rather know if you caught me so I can put it in the report saying I tried these 14 things. Yep, one worked, but these other 13 were caught. So pen test, absolutely. Try it all, do it, have a great time, try all those different things. You get caught with net, try net one, see what happens. Go through it. If you're doing a red team engagement where you are trying not to be noticed, then I'm going to try and avoid anything that I think is going to have a chance of being caught. And net one would definitely be in my list of things to avoid. So my personal opinion, it's very hard to say what you might see out there. So quick, the net examples right there. The next method that I want to talk about is straight LDAP queries. This is absolutely one of the best ways to get information out of AD. It will always be one of the best ways. And that's because in order for clients to be able to use Active Directory, they need to be able to get to LDAP. It's one of the required parts. Active Directory is an LDAP directory as well as doing other things. LDAP is always available. There's no extra ports that you need to have access to. You don't need to worry about having SMB access. You don't need to worry about anything else, just 389 or 636, 2 ports, and they will always be available to you. Unless that domain controller happens to be isolated from your network for some unknown reason. Your device that you're doing the querying from doesn't need to be in a domain anywhere because you can supply the credentials as part of the query. There are a ton of different tools and programs out there that exist that allow you to query this information. You don't need anything special. And LDAP itself is not a Windows-centric tool or utility. It's a very well documented method of getting information. Unfortunately, for you to use it, you need to understand the LDAP syntax, which is unique into itself. Depending on the tool that you're using, you may not get all of the results for a query because by default, you're only going to get a small number unless you add an extra piece of information to your query. The values that you get back from an LDAP query may not be human readable. There are so many different attributes in Active Directory. Attributes are pieces of information existing on objects. Objects are users, groups, etc. There's so many different types of attributes out there that have information that are just numbers. If you don't know what that refers to or what it means, it's not going to bring you any value. It's just some number. So you may not have anything actually usable depending on what you're trying to get. The other problem with LDAP is bad queries can absolutely kill a busy domain controller. Domain controllers can only handle so many LDAP queries at one time. If you build an inefficient query, it will take a long time for that domain controller to respond. And when I say a long time, 500 milliseconds is a long time. It might take a long time. You soak up one of those threads that AD is allowed to use. You have your other clients who are doing things, and suddenly the DC can't respond to LDAP anymore, and you start running into problems. From when I was managing and engineering and dealing with Active Directory all the time, this would kill us. At one point in time, we had a group stand up a Hadoop cluster. I think it was something around like 3,000 nodes in this cluster. And every once in a while, they would run this one job. It would hit one specific domain controller because their cluster was not AD aware. All of the clients hit it at once, and we just watched the domain controller literally catch on fire and die because it couldn't handle all of the queries that were trying to come in at one time. A question about LDAP and SOAP. I might need a little bit more detail. I'd be happy to talk about that later. I'm not exactly sure the relation between the two. Yeah. Tell me that adding too much text in the comment fields of AD would slow down AD overall. Yes and no. That's an interesting one. It depends on how we look at it. Like any database or LDAP directory, it will contain lots of information. Depending on what you're using to query that information, it might take a long time to get that entire field out of AD when you do the query, because you have to get that entire piece of text, right? The domain controllers have to send it all to you. Or even worse, if somebody has written queries that says, I am looking for some piece of information out of AD, then we have to search all of that text over and over and over again, which could absolutely slow things down. But it really depends. Having too much information in AD will begin to slow things down as information is returned. You kind of, when you build out an AD environment, you start trying to build wider than deeper, right? So you have multiple domain controllers out there that can help return information. But once again, absolutely, if you have way too much information in an attribute, it could absolutely begin to slow things down. It can slow down replication. All the domain controllers are sitting out there. They all believe that they are absolutely 100% authoritative. They all believe in themselves. They go through saying, hey, here's information. You need to take it. Please take this information. We need to pass it around. Too much can start slowing things down, et cetera, overall. So that doesn't mean don't put information AD. It might mean don't put the dictionary in a field, right? Be careful of what you're putting. Let me see. So LDAP, great way of getting information, something I highly recommend. Giving some examples here. LDAP filters, to give you an idea, this is just the filter. It is not the specific format for whatever tool you're using. So the filter to find the domain admins group is saying, hey, I'm looking for a group and I need the name to be domain admins. CN stands for common name. If I want to get all of the properties for a user account, in this case, SA1 is the name, I'm going to say Active Directory, I need you to give me the category, a person, a user. You need to do it twice. You don't really, but it's still better to do it. And same account name is SA1. Same account name is what we know of as your login name, what everybody knows as a login name. Then we get to have a fun one down here. I want to know all of the members of the built-in administrators group for this domain, whether they are direct member or a nested member. We mentioned earlier with net, it only gives direct membership. Net groups will only give you direct members. This will actually go out and say, who is a member of the administrators group? Now, are any of those groups? Great. Who's a member of those groups? And continue down the line until it can list everyone. But as you see, this is not exactly the most human readable method of getting information. And if I want to find all enabled user accounts, we do something similar. We have another very human readable method here that says I'm doing something special in this attribute equals 2. So great way of getting information, hard to do it necessarily. This is to get around this query said, oh, hold on, what are we asking about here? Some group names in Active Directory could be different languages. Yes, thank you, Kathy. That is a great mention. Yes, that will work for known groups. I find it interesting. I have clients who believe in security through obscurity. They've renamed their domain administrators group to Billy's group, and the administrator ID is now something like John, or once again, Billy, any number of things. Those special groups in AD, domain administrators, print operators, the list is fairly long, will have SIDs, which is the security identifier, which is actually used for granting security, but the security identifier will always be the same, or at least end in the same digits. So you can absolutely go through, and people rename things and I can't find administrator, then yes, I just go look for S-1-3-9-500. I think I did that right. And bang, there, I now have the administrator ID. So there are ways of getting the information outside of that. I cover that in the class, which I didn't talk about. I'll be teaching next week, covering Red Team Fundamentals for Active Directory. Cover some of those tips and tricks. This is really just about the tools. So someone said, I think LDAP can only be used to collect info and query domains, right? Not modify. Thank you for leading me right into my next slide. That is not correct. You can absolutely modify information with AD. Or with LDAP. That was a bad term right there. We mentioned, hey, what happens when you catch yourself? Right there. You can modify Active Directory and LDAP information with LDAP tools. My favorite tool for doing anything, or LDAP tool, for doing anything in Active Directory is a tool that's called LDP. It comes as part of the Active Directory Directory Services RSAT tools. You can install it on any Windows server, doesn't cause a reboot. You can install it on Windows 10 or 11 for free without rebooting. It's right, well, Windows 11 does require a reboot. Right there. You can absolutely go through and modify this information. So this happened to me recently as well. I had my box. I was sitting there and I didn't have other methods of communicating with the domain very well because of how everything was set up, but I could hit LDAP itself. I had credentials. All I did is added myself to domain admins through LDAP. So absolutely, you can start doing that. So very good tool to do. I have the steps right here, what to do with LDP and how you can do this. If you are not using LDP, if you are not using a Windows attack host and you are hitting and doing things with Active Directory, I urge you to add a Windows host into your environment, into your toolkit. It doesn't need to be anything specific. Things like Linux and all of the tools built with Linux absolutely work, 100% will work. If you can use a Windows box, there are some extra things you might be able to do that will help you in certain ways. It's a little bit closer to what the AD is expecting you to do. If you can have a Windows box that's on their domain, you're golden. You are so much further ahead than if you were not in the domain. So let me see. What are some questions here? Some problems. Can you run into problems getting nested group membership if you have certain? Yes. So another great question. If you are manually checking the, let's talk about a nested group really fast so everybody understands what that means. So once again, you can have a group in AD and it can have members. They can be users, computers, or other groups. If it's another group that is a member of the group you're caring about, it's considered a nested group. You can have this wonderful circular relationship happen, which is what was mentioned there, where you have group 1 and then there is group 2. That's a member of group 1. Then you have group 3 as a member of group 2, and then group 1 is a member of group 3. If you start running tools yourself that are going to go through and say, find the group, find its members. If you see a group, go down the line, continue, they will get stuck in this infinite loop. Using commands like I did with the LDAP here should not get that because it can actually then begin to parse it and get through. You should not run into an issue with that. There are other tools that will come from PowerShell, which we'll talk about in a minute, that will, once again, give you the list. It shouldn't get caught in that loop. Where you begin to run into other issues is if you have a group and you have multiple domains out there, so we have more than one domain, and you have members in this group in domain A, and those groups or people come from domain B. You could start running into problems getting that information back depending on how the query is formed and what access you have and how things are built. You can start running into, they're called referrals and chasing referrals, and having a whole bunch of things just begin to error out. Yes, the circular relationship, as mentioned there by Dozkar, absolutely. If you build your own tools that are looking at groups and going down the line, you will begin to run into errors, all sorts of the problems. So not run into that. Yes. So as always, haven't dug into it a lot. When we build our queries, whether we're using LDP or LDAP, or we're using PowerShell that we're talking about in a minute, you want to make them as narrow as you possibly can. Two reasons. Number one, as I mentioned, bad queries can absolutely crush domain controllers. Also, if you are asking for a lot of information back, you could begin to slow things down. On top of that, depending on your client and how they have built their environment, and if they're looking for inefficient queries, you'll start flagging that. It doesn't mean they know that you did something specifically or that you are causing a problem. Just the domain controller got something and was asked to return something, and it wasn't the best way of doing it. Either A, it was too broad and it didn't use index attributes and a whole bunch of other things which are kind of outside of this talk here, or it returned too much data and therefore was taking too long for it to supply the information. That can flag as an inefficient query. And if you have somebody who's looking up to or is using that flag as a problem, they might start investigating things. So we want to make our queries as nice as we possibly can. So A, avoid detection, and B, be nice to our client. So yes, circular problems are huge. Yeah. Also mentioned by UMD Smith, another great point. If they're using circular grouping and other problems, there are typically other issues that you can exploit. Quite often you're going to find, maybe passwords in clear text or too many permissions granted to other people, all sorts of things out there that will make it easier to move through the environment. So LDP and LDAP, great. I urge you, once again, LDP is my tool of choice. The main reason it's my tool of choice on a Windows box is it will automatically convert all of those attributes that are out there that don't mean anything to us as people into what it actually means for a Windows environment. So your AD forest functional level is 6. I don't know what that means off the top of my head, but it will do it automatically. It will say, hey, your user account control attribute is this. Well, that means, hey, your normal user account, you don't need to reset your password. Your password never expires. You don't even need a password, and something else. It will translate all of that over to you, so you don't need to go look it up all the time. What tool would I use on a Mac? If it's a newer Mac where you can't build your own VM, you can use LDAP search. It's a utility that's common with Linux. You could use that. I think there's Apache Studio also has a tool of getting things out there. PowerShell core can be installed on Mac OS, but I didn't think that you could actually load the AD commandlets in there. Now, you could build your own .NET queries to get AD information, but then you're kind of back in that same place. Unless things have changed. I didn't think you haven't. Yeah, I don't think you can actually load the AD commandlets, which is what we're going to talk about next, actually, in just a minute. Okay, so Mac has a built-in directory tool, so great. Okay, so they have VMs, great as well. Like I said, having a Mac as your main box or a Kali box or your choice of Linux, whatever it is, use whatever you are most comfortable with for dealing with most of your pen test. 100%. but having a Windows box that you can go and load Windows utilities on will help you immensely doing certain things. So that's why I say have a VM or, well, all right, 2 laptops or 2 devices, maybe not. But if there's a way, absolutely try and have a Windows. Yeah, Mac itself is not going to work the best on its own doing AD stuff. There are ways that you can, there are utilities out there. IM Packet, great suite of utilities to use to do things with AD, or Windows environments in general. Not as good, in my opinion, as using Windows inherent tools. So LDP, great method of doing it. Straight up multiple devices also will work for you if you can. LDAP packets wrapped in soap are really clean. Technically, anything wrapped in soap should be very clean. But then you have to deal with a soap envelope, and that may make you feel not clean trying to understand what it's doing. So it's not always the easiest thing to read, in my opinion. Oh, was there a new tool brought out here? I'm gonna have to look at that. SoapHound. Okay, SoapHound. I'll have to check that one out. Thank you. I want to make sure I caught all the questions here. Where should we run these LDAP filters? The ones that I showed before? Yes, they would be put in your tool of choice. And I will show it an example with LDP in just a little bit here. So they would be added to whatever tool. They are generic. They're generic LDAP filters. So they will work with LDAP search. They will work with LDP. They will work with any LDAP tool. All right. Python 3 has an LDAP tool. Absolutely. Yep. Someone said, if I'm not mistaken, you can limit data that can be read by normal users in AD, restrict AD fields, groups, description. Yes, you can, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. By default, an LDAP directory is considered readable by everybody in it. You can try and tweak security and put in blocks and denies and all sorts of things to limit who can see it. But you are going to be, making several very fine-grained security changes into AD. And if you mess that up, you are going to cause problems. And there's typically workarounds. One example I have is I have a few clients who have said you know what, I don't want people to be able to see you as a member of domain admins. I just block that. I don't let you see the membership of domain admins. That's fine. I can work backwards and I can query user accounts to say, hey, who's a member of domain admins? And that will return it for me. There are workarounds for a good amount of information out there. There are also extra attributes added into AD that are considered confidential. Once again, kind of outside the scope of this talk. Those require special permissions to see, but by default, you can see almost all the information out there. Exactly, Kathy. An example of a confidential attribute is LAPS, machine passwords, or BitLocker recovery password keys, or a whole bunch of different things out there. There are many examples of things that you will not be able to read by default unless they did something wrong, which happens quite often. So we covered the net executables. We covered LDP and LDAP. Now, probably my favorite one, but I'm a Windows guy, the PowerShell commandlets. PowerShell, once again, built into every Windows box out there, known to man. It's been included since 2008. You could install it with 2003, but it's been there forever. If you load the AD commandlets, which are part of the Active Directory Domain Services RSAT tool again, you can use things that will query information. Using them is easier than LDAP, although you might still need to do some LDAP filtering here and there, depending on what you're trying to look for, but it's very easy to use. It is standard PowerShell language now and not LDAP. The objects that you get back when you query information are PowerShell objects. You can start doing other things with them automatically through PowerShell. It's not just a list of things, text. Most of the attributes, almost all of them, are converted into a human readable format. Yet again, just like LDP, I don't need to get something and try and look up what that number means. It's just translated for me. It will return all of the objects when you do a search, a query, and not just a subset, because it automatically does something called paging. It will continue to query and give you all the information that is appropriate, not just a subset. Using the PowerShell commandlets does not require that you are in that domain, just like LDAP doesn't. You can have your box as long as you have access to the domain controller, you're good. The downside is it requires a special service to be running on the domain controller, and you have access to another port 9389. That is not considered a true standard Active Directory port, and some people may block it. I don't see that happen very often in most of the environments I'm at. Typically, they allow that port to be open to clients, but you might run into a situation where you can't. The last pen test I did where I had to use LDAP is because they were blocking PowerShell to domain controllers. So I couldn't use my normal tool. The downside is it's probably not on a compromised host. So if you don't have your own Windows box that you own, that you can get on the network that has these tools installed, they probably aren't going to be on that compromised host, and you'll have to install them. But luckily, installing it on a server doesn't require reboot. You might want to talk to your client first and say, hey, I want to install these tools. Are you okay with it? But it should not cause a problem. Installing those tools, it doesn't require reboot. It's very innocuous to do. The other problem with PowerShell is one that I hear from everybody who tries PowerShell for the first time, which is it's verbose. It is not what I call the leanest language ever to use, but it is absolutely usable. If I block that port, am I going to break your domain? Port 9389. I'm going to go back to the great security term of maybe. Probably not. But it depends where you're blocking it from. If you have a well-defined network where you have your client devices on one subnet and one network, and you have servers and other things on another network, you should be fairly safe blocking 9389 to your client devices, unless your users are using the commandlets. The likelihood of them hitting 9389 is pretty limited. Now, if they are doing any Windows administration, and when I say Windows administration, that could be Exchange administration, it could be SQL administration, it could be SharePoint, any number of those tools, they have tended to really be running PowerShell on the back end these days. If they are then going to query AD for any information, which Exchange and SharePoint most likely will, you're going to start running into problems. So your users hopefully aren't doing administrative access and administrative things from their normal user boxes. Otherwise, that's a different problem I'm going to be exploiting when I come down on your environment. Exactly, Stingray, you shouldn't be using your client for administrative duties. But I do know places where that exists. My typical groups that I look at immediately are your developers and your DBAs, because in my last 7 years and historically beyond that, when I was responsible for AD, those were the two groups that typically said, no, I need to do it for my own box. So the second con listed here is that the PowerShell commandlets that we're going to use to query this information those tools are not installed by default on a box. PowerShell is going to be there, but the commandlets that we want to leverage won't be there, and you'll have to install those to be able to use these. That's what the second con is. So PowerShell is there, but not the AD commandlets. You're right, I should update the slide to say PowerShell AD commandlets. Minor mistake on my point. So good catch, thank you. I heard one time got domain admin through a web request. Uh, yes, but that goes to so many misconfigurations, right? Once again, that is, I had an application that existed out there that we could do stuff with. In that case, it was, you could do LDAP injection. Hey, that's great. Not only am I able to query information, but I can say actually modify it. We sent the request, and it was nice that this utility had more privileges that it should have in the domain. There are so many environments out there where people still make service accounts, domain admins for different reasons. Quite often it's because people developing applications don't understand what they actually need, and they're like, just make it a domain admin and you're good to go. And then that's what's done. Let me see. You should be able to use the .NET objects through, yes, absolutely, JD50. If you are a .NET person, you can absolutely do that. I've done that before myself, right? I can't install these extra tools on this box. Let me start querying .NET directly. And I don't have that in the slide deck. I do cover that in my class next week about how you can build objects and things in PowerShell to do straight .NET calls and get that same information. Downside to that is it doesn't do the reformatting and reconstruction for you to tell you what that attribute actually means. So some quick samples here, similar to what I did before. It's almost the same as what we listed with LDAP, but it is now in the PowerShell commandlet format. This first one is going to find all the members of the domain admins group, including nested groups. And then it's actually going to give me their user account name. So if you're not familiar with PowerShell, this is get AD group member, give me the actual members of the group. Here's the group I'm looking for. Recursive is look everywhere and get me everything. But then I have to say, give me same account name because of the information that's in there. So RSAT, Active Directory Domain Services and Lightweight Directory Services tools have been installed. Yes, that is correct. The RSAT tools should still continue to work, even on older versions. So if you have access to AD as a standard user, what are ways you can escalate privilege to be an administrator? Step one is you find out what you have access to. That can be by querying LDAP or by other means, but you see what you can do, what you have access to. Do you have admin access? Do you have write access to things? If you don't, then you start looking to see who does, and you see where they are and see if you can get somewhere. Yes, ACLs would get you there the simplest, but you have to query them, which we'll cover in just a minute. So here's some examples for you. As I said, similar things that we've been querying before with the different tools, just a different syntax to do it as I look at my time. So using AD commandlets remotely, not on that box. Number one, you need to have port 9389 open to the domain controller. Be sure that you add an extra little parameter to all your queries, the -server parameter. All these don't have it. That says go out and reach to this domain controller, the specific one, and get me the information. Then you can run it as different people. You have a compromised Kerberos ticket, you import it into your PowerShell window and you start doing that. You do a PowerShell window with run as net only, and then you're querying, you're using all of your remote calls, anything going across the network as the new user you have specified. You can also store your credentials in a PowerShell as PowerShell credentials, and then run them as another one as -credential. So here's my example using all of this together, the -credential, $creds equals get credential. That will pop up a window where you put in the user ID and password you want to use. And then you say get AD domain -server, because I want to hit this one specifically. You could put name or IP address, either one will work. Name is typically a better way to go. And then credentials with the variable that I pulled up here before. When I say name, I mean DNS name. The last tool, even though I said 3, number 4 is Active Directory users and computers. This is the GUI that's installed, the old GUI, because it was out from way back when, Windows 2000 days. that goes and will show you information in a GUI format. It's very easy to use. It will show you the structure of everything, very easy. It's also the best way to see those ACLs on an object. AD Explorer, you can use that one as well. Absolutely. I don't use that one as often as I probably should, in all honesty. I would rather use ADUC than AD Explorer. So I should probably add that one to my wheelhouse more often than I do. Typically, I'm running through PowerShell myself. It is the best way to show ACLs. And the reason is ACLs are just text. If you query it with LDAP or you query it with PowerShell, by default, what you're going to see is a GUID and some piece of information and a SID, and you may not know what it means exactly. Oh, somebody's talking about bad blood. Yep, that's a good one. So fair. LDP does a better job of displaying them without combining them into special. Yes, I completely agree. In this case, anything under special or this object or whatever it might be might require you to actually look at the details individually. This is a more manual process, Jim. I completely agree, but it often is easier for people to read and figure out who has that rights than trying to read the ACLs themselves and seeing what that might refer to, because they aren't always translated, yet again, depending on the tool you're doing. So I do agree with you. LDAP and other tools can absolutely give you that information. Yeah. Oh, well, Jim, I'm happy for you that you can read those like English. Most people can't. So that's awesome. You must be an old school developer who's trying to assign security ACLs and things through programs. I applaud you in being able to do that. Does the class include escalation via certificate abuse? So I have not put that in there for one reason, and that is I like to cover how AD is working and things that will work in any environment. Not everybody is set up a Windows certificate authority, but it is something that we can do. It's something we can absolutely cover during the class and how it works and what it's looking for. The tools that you would use actually are just querying AD for information in a lot of cases. And so you can see that without running those extra tools as well. So that is a great way of escalating privileges, by the way, even though the notice of how to use certificates to abuse AD permissions, I think was published in 2000. Was it in 2000? It's still not been a common technique that everybody is looking at or things of going out there. And most people either A, aren't using certificate authorities, B, are using some default settings and therefore they're safe with the templates, or C, yeah, they have no idea what they're doing and you have all sorts of fun. Not many people are qualified to set up Windows PK. I would agree that is not an easy one to do. It can be, yep, absolutely, it can cause problems. So yeah, there's the original post from some incredibly smart guys out there. So yes. I only have 5 minutes. I ran long and it's mainly because of the questions, which I've really been enjoying. I was going to show the differences between the different tools, but that might be a little difficult with the time that we have left. How does removing everyone in authenticated users groups affect the ability to query if you have not already been able to elevate privileges? I need a little bit more. Yeah, the questions have been absolutely great. How does remove? I need a little bit more detail on that one as far as what do you mean removing those? LDP, sure, I can do an LDP demo. So this is my Windows attack host. His name is Chernabog. By the way, if you ever see Chernabog out there, on your network. Hi. We'll see what happens. I have a pretty good track record of getting domain admin in environments. So here is LDP. This is the tool once again. I had to install the RSAT tools here. This box, as shown, oh, it's not shown. For some reason, BGO info left. This box is not part of the domain. It is its own little standalone box. Just to show really fast, I open PowerShell. I'm going to run a very simple PowerShell command, get AD domain, which would let me see information about the domain if I had rights, but just to prove that I don't. There we go. The server has rejected my credentials. I'm not there. I can't do it. So using LDP, I want to connect to the domain controller. This is its IP. I could also put its name. The port 389, default LDAP port, probably what you're going to use to do the queries. There's another one, 636. Some differences there. Without credentials, all I can see is some basic information. But once again, to highlight the most important part about LDP, this is converting things over for me to human readable format. So domain controller functionality 7, I can never remember. That means it's a Windows 2016 forest and domain. So it will start converting even more things like all of these wonderful things down here that are just random numbers. What does it mean? Converts it all for you. But I can't see anything else unless I log in, and that's the bind. I'm going to bind as a user because I don't have any. So let's use user 2. And I'm going to specify the password and the domain I'm a member of, lab.pvt. And there, I've now authenticated. Once again, this box itself, the user, it's a normal user, Chernobog, nothing. From here, the first thing that I'm typically going to do is I'm going to say, hey, let me look at the tree, view tree. And you will be able to select different partitions. The one that is the name, DC equals the domain you're in, you want to query, is what's going to have the objects you're typically looking at. And it will show you, could you start drilling through pieces just like you would anything. To do a search, when you click on a box, or sorry, an object, so in this case, I clicked on administrator, it automatically parses and gives you the information back. You don't even need to do a search. But if I didn't know where something is, I can come up here and I can say search. And we can do specific things, search for different objects. So this is not the best query in the world because I'm saying search everybody for SA1, where that is. A scope is I'm only going to look at the level I'm at. I'm going to look one level below me, which is OUs. We cover that more in the class. Subtree is look everywhere. And then the star says return everything. And there we go. It finds that thing for me and it will bring it back. It was nice seeing you as well. So that is general searching, right? You have the ability to search from up here. LDP will also let you look at ACLs. If you look at the security descriptor, so somebody was saying that they love SDDL, so I can show the things. This is the security descriptor. I can't remember what the other DL stands for, but language is the last part. As I said, this is what it returns. It doesn't really, for most people, mean anything. You might be able to look at the security descriptor's text, which unfortunately I can't in this case, but it will show you something. ADUC would show you the graphical way. If I wanted to make a change using LDAP, in this case, I would go through, I would say, I'd select the object I want, domain admins, I'd say modify. You need to know what you want to do. You look at the member. Yeah, it wouldn't run. Yeah. So we look at domain admins here, a quick CN, its name, member is who is a member of this group. We see domain admin 1. So I want to modify the member of this group. I would come in here, I'd say member, and I would have to give it the distinguished name of the person I want to use. So I won't have rights, but let's say domain admin 2. It's very important with this operation. Add, as it sounds, I'm going to add. Delete, I'm going to remove it. Replace, whatever is in that attribute at this moment is going to be replaced by what I put here. You want to do add typically for what we're talking about. You'd see it be here. I'm going to add this guy, and then you click run. I'm going to get an error because I'm just a normal user. So here we go. You can go through. If you had permissions to modify it, it would add it, and then you'd see everything is good. That's the quick rundown. And we're at 1 o'clock exactly. So
Our good timing, Eric. Well done.
Yep.
Coming right to the end of it.
Yeah, sorry, I ran a little
good.
late. I will continue to look for questions though, but I know we have to stop.
Yeah, amazing job on answering questions on the fly during your presentation. There's, I've watched John Strand do it a lot, and I'm like, I don't know how you do that and not get derailed. So well done, Eric. You John Stranded it.
Thank you. I'm going to take that as a huge compliment.
It is a huge compliment.
Like massive. So.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thanks guys for joining us. There were obviously a ton of questions that you, I think, did a great job of answering, like I said, but if anyone has another one that they'd like Eric to answer that we didn't cover, go ahead and pop it in the Discord chat and we'll try to answer. We'll stick around for a couple minutes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any talks coming up for me? So that's a great question. I was actually submitting a bunch of talks to find out most of the conferences were going to be in April, which turned out to be a very bad month for me. I have one child in gymnastics, and that is prime gymnastics time. Like, hey, here's nationals and regionals and all this stuff. And my twins, the middle ones, are going to college, and that is also prime welcome to college time. And so we're going to be touring different colleges. So I will definitely post when I'm going to be talking again. I just need to find when I am going to be talking.
Looking for one of those buy one, get one 50% off kind of deals.
That would be so nice if it happened that way. So I have one in college right now, 2 more going, and in 2 years I'll have 4 in college. And yeah, I'm not looking forward.
Yeah, my twins are in high school. I got the freshmen. I got 4 more years. So
you both have twins?
Yes. I was, when you said that.
We were talking about that in pre-show. Yeah.
Okay, I missed that part.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a different kind of 4 kids, guys. That's
no, but that's how you don't have middles. And how my wife guaranteed we had 4 kids. That was one of our big jokes. I wanted 2, she wanted 4. We had 1, we went for the second, we got 2. Now I'm at 3. I'm like, I have no leg to stand on. So
it really is. Once you get past 3, it's like, what's one more? Like seriously,
exactly.
I get now why people have 6. I mean, we're not.
No, 5 is crazy.
5 is crazy.
You've gone bonkers because at 4, each adult still has 2 hands when they're kids.
That's why I had to build a shed for my office because I ran out of bedrooms.
Yeah.
I'm like literally out in my backyard. This is where I am.
Awesome.
Well, hey everybody. So we're going to do the Sasquatch again. So if you are looking for training to get for yourself, for if your team at work needs some training, put a Sasquatch in the Discord chat, and I will reach out to you about how to get that training going. So post your Sasquatch, your best Sasquatch GIF, or just the word Sasquatch, and I will send you some info about getting training.
That is my favorite Sasquatch GIF for sure. Sassy Squatch. Yeah, well done, Eric. Yeah, if you enjoyed this, give Eric some kudos and let him know that you enjoyed it.
Yep.
In the
I
chat.
appreciate everybody here and listening to me ramble for an hour. So
we loved having you, and the chat loved having you as well. They're already asking when you coming back. So
yeah, I'll be back at some point.
Yes, after April for sure.
After April, maybe beforehand too.
Maybe. Awesome. Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions. Some people came
also, everyone, if you like, these talks and topics on this, especially the stuff that's free, we have a summit coming up. The most offensive con that ever offensed is coming up in early March. So make sure you register for that. The conference itself is virtual and free. And then there's lots of paid training happening on the back end of that. So
we'll post the link in the Discord again. It's also in the resources section in Zoom. So lots of ways to find it. But yes, free. We love giving a lot of stuff away. If this is your first time, this is us. This is Antisyphon and Black Hills, and we really want to help you succeed. We want you to be the best possible versions of yourselves, and we love giving away. I love giving away lots of things. So welcome. Thanks for giving us a chance.
Yep. Thank you all.
Okay. Well, with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it. Ryan, you have one job. So Ryan, you kill it. Kill the fire.